Shri Gaur Nitai ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Bol. Hare Krishna. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, this morning Canto 3. We're starting Canto 3, just concluded Canto 2. So it's the very first verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, first and the second verse. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. I think the devotees on this side are having some difficulty with the board going that close.
Could the devotee who writes the verse actually write the letters bigger in the future?
Sure.
And maybe use a broad pen. It's just like a pinpoint pen. can hardly see it.
Would you pass that message, Sanket?
It's impossible to read it from this distance.
Sure.
You cannot read it from this distance.
Okay. Thank you for the feedback, Prabhu. I think the devotees here will pass it on to the relevant devotees. So I'll read the text one, Sanskrit and translation, and then we will read the text two together. Shri Sukha Uvacha Evam Etat Pura Prishto Maitreyo Bhagavan Kila Kashatra Vanam Pravishtena Tyaktava Swagraham Ridhimat. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Sukdev Goswami said, after renouncing his prosperous home and entering the forest, King Vidura, the great devotee, asked this question of His Grace Maitreya Rishi. Text 2. Yatva ayam mantra kritvo Yatva ayam mantra kritvo Bhagwan Akhileshwaraha Pauravendra graham hitva Pravivisheta masat kritam Yatva ayam mantra kritvo Bhagwan Akhileshwaraha Pauravendra graham hitva Pravishtat smat kritam Yatva ayam mantra kritvo Bhagwan Akhileshwaraha Pauravendra graham hitva Pravishtasmat kritam. Prabhu's Yadvavayam mantkritvo Bhagavan Akhileshwaraha Ravindra Grihat Vitva Praviveshatma Satkritam Yadvayayam mantra kritvo Bhagavan Akhileshwaraha Pauravendra graham hitva Praviveshatma Satkritaho Yadvayayam mantra kritvo Bhagavan Akhileshwaraha Pauravendra graham hitva Pravideshatma satkritam Haritayayam mantra kritvo Bhagavan Akhileshwaraha Pauravendra graham hitva Praviveshatma satkritam. Mataji's. Yadvayam mantra kritvo Bhagavan Akhileshwaraha Pauravendra graham hitva Praviveshatma satkritam. One more. Yadvayam mantra kritvo Bhagavan Akhileshwaraha Pauravendra graham hitva Praviveshatma satkritam. Word to word translation. Yat, the house. Why, what else is there to say? I am Sri Krishna. Mantra Krit, minister. Va, you people. Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead. Akhila Ishvara, the Lord of everything. Pauravendra, Duryodhan. Graham house, Hitva giving up. Pravesha entered. Atmasat, identifying with oneself. Kritam, so accepted. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. What else is there to say about the residential house of the Pandavas? Sri Krishna, the Lord of everything, acted as your minister. He used to enter that house as if it were his own, and he did not take any care of Duryodhan's house. Purport. According to the Gauriya Achintya Bheda Abheda Tattva philosophy, anything which satisfies the senses of the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna is also Sri Krishna. For example, Sri Vrindavan Dham is not different from Sri Krishna. Tat Dhama Vrindavanam. Because at Vrindavan, the Lord enjoys the transcendental bliss of his internal potency. Similarly, the house of the Pandavas was also the source of transcendental bliss for the Lord. It is mentioned here that the Lord identified the house with his own self. Thus, the house of the Pandavas was as good as Vrindavan. And therefore, and Vidura should not have given up that place of transcendental bliss. Therefore, the reason for his quitting the house was not exactly family misunderstanding. Rather, Vidura took the opportunity to meet Rishi Maitreya and discuss transcendental knowledge. For a saintly person like Vidura, any disturbance due to worldly affairs is insignificant. Such disturbances, however, are sometimes favorable for higher realization, and therefore Vidura took advantage of a family misunderstanding in order to meet Maitreya Rishi. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vande Ham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Evacha Patita Nam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna everyone, good morning. I'd like to seek the blessings of all of you, especially the seniors who are present here. My Bhakti Vaibhav teachers, Param Karuna Prabhu, who's seated right there in the corner. He is an exemplary devotee, and he inspired me in taking to the reading of Srimad Bhagavatam along with Navdeep Chandra Prabhu. So my obeisances to both of them. Hare Krishna. So just before we begin discussing this text 1 and text 2 of the Canto 3, chapter 1, I thought it would be nice to look at Canto 3 as a whole, because it's the first verse in the beginning of the Canto 3. So here, what is happening is that Parikshit Maharaj at the beginning of the Canto 3 is inquiring about the meeting of the two great personalities, which is Vidura and Maitreya. And this conversation, believe it or not, goes all the way to the end of the 4th canto. So this is the beauty of Srimad Bhagavatam, just beginning with the two personalities. The whole of 3rd canto and pretty much the whole of 4th canto is going on in that conversation. And in this particular canto, you will see a lot of variety of the topics which have been discussed in Krishna consciousness. and some amazing, inspiring activities of various Vaishnavas, exalted Vaishnavas are being discussed here. So some of the topics which have been discussed in the third canto are, for example, Sarga, the creation, Visarga, the sub-creation. Then you have topics like the time, what happens in the embryo as the child takes birth in the mother's womb. Family life is discussed, and some good example of family life. What are some of the good example of the family life which has been discussed in this chapter is the example of, I'm trying to remember the name is just coming, sorry. Yeah, Kardama Muni and Devahutis as a good example has been discussed. And then the process of Sankhya, the Bhakti Yoga has been discussed, Jnana Yoga, Karma, culture, spiritual world, the material world, and a brief description of the hell before we proceed into the fourth, and then the fifth canto is being discussed. And these topics are discussed through the various stories which have been interwoven between one to another. So for example, the story of, the personalities who are discussed are Vidura, Maitreya, Uddhava, Lord Brahma, the four Kumaras, the Jaya and Vijay, the famous personality who comes down later as Jagai, Madhai, or Ravan and Kumkaran, Swayambhuva Manu, Devahuti, and Kardama Muni. These are some of the personalities which have been discussed in the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And now in the chapter 1, what is being discussed is right at the beginning, at the outset, Vidura's detachment and his maturity, and how he begins his journey to his pilgrimage actually is being discussed. And then Uddhava's deep spiritual emotions for his beloved Lord Krishna and his amazing recollections of Krishna's pastime. In the 11th canto, almost 23 chapters have been dedicated to this wonderful conversation which has been happening between Krishna and Uddhava, whereas Krishna is imparting this wonderful knowledge to him, beginning with different processes of the yoga and establishing the superiority of the devotional service actually. And now Uddhava actually is reminding of, remembering all those wonderful times and discussing, although we are in the third canto, and then we see this is the amazing beauty of Srimad Bhagavatam. The 11th canto was discussed, but now Uddhava is remembering all those past times, and now he's relating those here in this conversation. And then you see the Vidura's sensitivity when he was approached, is laudable here because he is accepting Uddhava, who's in age younger to him, as his spiritual master. And then immediately you see the humility of Uddhava, who actually says, I'm not qualified to speak Srimad Bhagavatam or these pastimes, but I do know a personality who's just a little bit further from where we are seated, Maitreya Rishi, who can actually impart this knowledge to you. So I am yet to see any literature like Srimad Bhagavatam where such beautiful relationship, conversations, and all these wonderful pastimes are being enacted. That's what makes the Bhagavatam so beautiful and so relishable by the devotees. And then we see Vidura's inquiries begin with the topic which is relevant. Vidura is asking the questions about creation. And then just in few verses down the line, Vidura is actually very clearly saying, I am interested in these creation and sub-creation pastime, but I'm what really interested is in Krishna Katha. But just because the questions are so relevant to the common people, as we hear from the Srimad Bhagavatam first canto, right at the outset in the Naimisharanya, the Sutta Goswami is about to speak Srimad Bhagavatam to the 18,000 sages who are assembled there. And how is that Sutta Goswami is actually congratulating the Sonaka Rishi, the sage who's heading the 18,000 sages, saying that your questions are laudable because they're meant for the benefit, of the whole world. And that's where he begins to speak Srimad Bhagavatam. So similarly here you see that Maitreya Rishi is very much appreciating Vidura's questions in the mood, and now he's going to begin to answer those questions in these chapters. And then the creation, Brahma's, how Brahma comes into place, the various three, Vishnu's incarnation, the Garbhodakshai, the, Vishnu, Shirodakshai Vishnu, Karunadakshai Vishnu, all three are being discussed in detail. Stories of Jaya and Vijay have been discussed, and then the two types of the household life which are discussed. So the two good, one bad example was the Kashyapa and the Aditi's example is being discussed in third canto, and the good example was Kardama Muni and Devahuti is being discussed. So I thought I'll just try and set the scene of the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam just to bring into the context of where we are in this canto. And now we will discuss this particular verse, the text 1 and 2. So in text 1 and 2, what is happening is Vidura is renouncing his beautiful home and going away. The word riddhi is used, which means opulence. So the house was extremely opulent. There was nothing which was lacking in the house. So materially, there was actually no reason for Vidura to leave. And then the word tyaktava is given here in the first verse, which means to give up and to go to the forest. And the reason it is explained by our acharyas is the reason Vidura decided to go is mainly twofold. Number one, that he could not perform his bhajan properly there. And the second reason is he could not preach properly there. So these are the two reasons why Vidura decided to leave. And actually there is a third reason, which is in relation to the preaching, that the ground wasn't fertile enough, that Dhritarashtra wasn't ready for his instructions as yet. He could still see that he's eating of the Kauravas. He was still so much attached to, being in that kingdom, and although blind, but yet wanted to be a ruler of that place actually. And seeing all this, Vidura said, the mango hasn't ripe yet. Let me go away, and there may be a time in the future when the mango is a bit ripe, and then we can eat that mango. And that's exactly what happened. So here in this particular place, we see that Vidura leaves, and then we are coming into the text too, where the translation is, what else is there to say about the residential house of the Pandavas? Sri Krishna, the Lord of everything, acted as your minister. He used to enter that house as if it were his own, and he did not take any care of Duryodhana's house. So very beautiful verse. And we see that the devotee's place is sacred too, as much as the place of the Lord Krishna. And the relevance is being made to Sri Vrindavan Dham, that how Vrindavan Dham is non-different to Krishna. Similarly, how the holy name is different to Krishna. Prabodhananda Saraswati Thakur, in his book Vrindavan Mahima Amrita, he explains that even if someone looks in the direction of Vrindavan and bows down, he gets 1,000 times benefit actually of being in Vrindavan. That's the glories of Vrindavan Dham. And then it is explained that how the devotees are essentially, the glories of the devotees is as good as the glories of Lord Krishna. In fact, there is a verse in Srimad Bhagavatam, I think 10th canto, 1st chapter, 69th verse. There is a relevance. Prabhupada writes in the purport. Actually, I'll read that. It's very profound statement Prabhupada makes in that verse, which I'd like to read here with all of you, by your permission. It is said here there that glorifying the Lord and glorifying the Lord's devotees are the same, or rather glorifying the devotee is more important. Actually, sorry, this is in reference in Canto 10 from text, chapter 1 to chapter 13. This reference has been made. And there it's mentioned that in fact, glorifying the devotee is more important than glorifying the Lord directly. Narottam Das Thakur explains this fact that Chariye Vaishnav Seva Nishtara Paiche Keba. One cannot be liberated from material contamination without sincerely serving a devotee of Krishna. How many of you had an opportunity to read Srila Prabhupada Lilamrit? Okay, many of you. If anyone hasn't had a chance, please see me outside the door. We'll give you Lilamrit set. We have it in the bookstore, and you can begin reading. It's one of my first books I read when I started practicing Krishna consciousness, being inspired by my wife who was already practicing this. And I noticed that when I was reading the childhood pastimes of Srila Prabhupada, Satsarup Maharaj mentions that how Srila Prabhupada's father, Gaur Mohan De, would make kachoris for Srila Prabhupada and fry them up. I don't know what it is. I have never felt, and I started to cry. Those were not the tears of ecstasy, by the way, and I haven't reached that platform, nowhere close to it. But all of a sudden, I became very emotional. Just the fact that Prabhupada's father was cooking these kachoris for Srila Prabhupada. And then he goes on to read the Prabhupada's pastime where he wants to buy the gun. And then somehow or other he insists and his father gets him a gun. And that wasn't enough. Prabhupada wanted to hold another gun in his hand. And then the father gets him another gun. So Prabhupada has two guns in his hand. Now, that may sound, if you materially look at from outwardly, what does that pastime got to do with Leelas of pure devotee? But that's what is transcendental. Srila Prabhupada, everything he did was transcendental. And that's what makes it even more beautiful, the glories of the devotees. Just imagine Canto 7, Srimad Bhagavatam, pastimes of Narsinghadev. For a minute, just hypothetically remove Prahlad Maharaj from it, would it have any significance, those whole pastimes? They won't have any, I mean, they'll have some significance because the Lord's name is there, but the sweetness will not come about until you bring Prahlad Maharaj into the equation, actually. So that's why these pastimes of the Lord and the devotees, they go together. And similarly, you see when you go to these various beautiful places like Mayapur, Vrindavan Dham, they hold such a significance for the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. Especially if you go to the ground zero of the International Society of the Krishna Consciousness Movement, which my spiritual master calls it ground zero, which is the Shiva Sangan, where the Sankirtan movement began. I mean, just being in that place, you can feel the energy is so palpable. You know, you're there and you can just feel, you know, the Panchatattvas are dancing, that Mridanga, that beautiful darshan of the Gaurnitai deities, it just exports you into the Navdeep, you know, the actual Navdeep pastimes which are still going on actually. Similarly, if you go further down to Godrum Deep in Surabhi Kunj, you go to Bhakti Vinod Thakur's place and you will feel the energy. Bhakti Vinod Thakur did his bhajan and he prayed for a ray of Vishnu. He prayed for the preaching in that place. So these places bring about a revolution in the devotee's life. That's why going to the Dham is the best thing a devotee can do. It's the best use of our legs is to go to Dham and go around. I mean, take example Govardhan. I've been to few parikramas and I'm yet to see somebody who's not happy going around the hill of Govardhan. Have you ever noticed a face which is morose and unhappy? No, everybody is blissed out and everybody is trying to catch up with the other person. You know, somebody comes past you and then you're trying to say, I need to keep going. Because the moment you stop and sit down, that's where it gets very difficult to finish the parikrama. But somehow or other, if you keep going, you will just feel that Giriraj is completely protecting you, taking care of you, and you can go around the whole hill, 21 kilometers, and yet be very, very blissed out, actually. So these places are very much in sync with the mood of the devotees, and that is why you see when you take darshan, for example, of the deities, Radha Govind Dev Ji, which is now worshipped in Jaipur, when you look at those deities at 5 o'clock in the morning when the arti is going on, you can see those deities. You can see the bhav of Rupa Goswami coming into those deities actually. And that's what makes it special. Radha Gokulananda right here, beautiful deity worship is going on under amazing leadership of our, you know, deity worship department. And you can just see that, you know, the devotees doing the arti, everything is going on so beautifully. And you can see that Srila Prabhupada installed that deity and that mood is very much still present. You know, that picture of him with Shivram Maharaj in the background and all the Vaishnavas here and Prabhupada doing the first Aarti of Radha Gokulananda. And we are about to celebrate the 50th anniversary this year. You can just see that presence of Srila Prabhupada very much you can feel when you're worshipping the deities. These are very sacred deities and very, very beautiful deities. Jai Shri Shri Radha Gokulanand ki Jai, Shri Shri Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman ki Jai, Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki Jai. Yeah, I mean the spiritual world is right here and you can feel, you know, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Amara Man Vrindavan. We have to make our mind Vrindavan and the Vrindavan is very much present where we have the deities and such beautiful deity worship is actually going on. Otherwise, where else in the morning, if you can imagine, most people in England at 4:30 are returning from the pub, but you're sitting in the temple doing a Mangal Aarti. What a paradox, right? It's completely different world we live in, you know. And we are also actually doing similar thing. We are dancing, we are singing, we are having a great party, and we are intoxicated by the devotees who are leading the kirtan in the morning. And when you sing the prayer, Samsara Dava Naladita Loka, it just exports you into the real party, not the party which goes on in the nightclubs and the pubs which we see here. You know, that's what makes the place. You know, that's what makes the life of devotees exhilarating, and that's what makes it worth living a life. You know, which has some special significance actually. So Vrindavan Dham is non-different to the Dham of Krishna. And then we look at why Vidura is leaving the house, and we talked about meeting, why he left the house because of those 3 reasons. But ultimately, the main positive reason was to meet Maitreya Rishi and hear the pastimes of Krishna. So you see, here, can you think of an example if Krishna wants or if devotee desires from our movement? Can you think of an example where, you know, there was a lot of push from the material energy and the people for us to leave, but Prabhupada holded the ground. He decided not to leave. Sorry? Prabhu, you're saying something. Juhu temple. This temple, absolutely, that's one example. Somebody said Juhu, right? Yes, ISKCON Juhu is another example. Radhesham Prabhu from Pune, great veteran devotee in our movement, I was hearing his class a few days ago on this verse, and he was giving an example of Juhu. And he was saying that what is it that did not happen in the Juhu temple to do everything for the devotees to leave from there? There was a time when devotees came together and said, that's it, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, you got to go to Srila Prabhupada and tell him that we just cannot stay here. The ladies are being harassed. Mr. N or Mr. Nair is printing these small pamphlets into the newspaper, really obnoxious things about ISKCON, and it is very, very humiliating. Tamal Krishna Maharaj felt, okay, this is the right thing. He took it to Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada, do you think we should maybe leave and take to a house near the beach, and maybe we can come back when the situation is better? And Srila Prabhupada said one thing. He said, go and ask the devotees whether they want purification or not. That was Prabhupada's statement. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj knew that, yes, we want purification, and that's why we stay. And that's why that beautiful book Giriraj Maharaj wrote, I'll Build You the Temple. All these details are covered very nicely in that place. And Prabhupada holded the ground. He went to Radha Ras Bihari and he said, please stay in this hut, this small hut which is there, and I'll build you the palace. Those were the words Prabhupada said to the deities, and that all came true. Srila Prabhupada is directly from a spiritual world. He was speaking to the deities, and he said to Radha Ras Bihari, hold the ground in the hut, very soon you'll have a palace here, actually. And during that whole thing, there was a time when Prabhupada got a call when he was in America and said, Prabhupada, sorry, the land went. We had to just give it in because it was just too much for us. And Prabhupada didn't say anything, got back to Bombay, fought the case again, and he took the land back. And look at the beautiful temple. I mean, Mumbai is the business capital of India, and Srila Prabhupada knew exactly why that place was so important. All the financial accounts of all over the India from the ISKCON temples are submitted to the Juhu temple. For this very reason, because Prabhupada knew that this monumental temple will be the temple for the India in the coming days. Now you look at every Bollywood personality, he walks past, they go into the temple, so many getting inspired. All businessmen are coming to the Juhu temple. Prabhupada could see all of this which is happening. So he holded the ground that I'm not going to let the Juhu go. Why? Because for the benefit of so many of us. In fact, my first temple I visited of ISKCON was ISKCON Juhu temple. Because my wife, when we were not married, she took me to meet the devotees. I had no idea what the devotees were like. And I said, okay, I'll come to Juhu because I just need to get married to you. That was the thing. So I'll come to Juhu. So I went to the Juhu temple, and there I met with the devotees. I saw the beautiful Govindas, had the prasadam. I'm yet to see it. All Govindas are glorious, but Juhu is special, guys. And then I met with these devotees from Mumbai, and and it was an amazing sight because I stayed at this Prabhu's home. His name is Braj Mohan Prabhu. Still grateful till this day for introducing me to Krishna consciousness along with my wife. And he asked me the first question when I met him. He said, what is it that you want to do in your life? And I was very driven coming from hospitality background. I said, I want to become a general manager of a 5-star hotel. He said, fantastic. And he really, encouraged me. He said, you should do it. And then he started talking for a few things here and there, and then came back on the topic. He said, just imagine for a second that you only have a week left to live now. What will you do? I said, I'll think of the God. He goes, here is the bead bag, and start chanting Hare Krishna. I mean, that's Chopati style of preaching Hare Krishna, So, and I started chanting Hare Krishna. So that was my beginning days at the Juhu, at Juhu temple and meeting the devotees in Bombay. So coming back to the point, all these places hold a significant importance for the devotees. And then think of an example, Jhansi, right, for Srila Prabhupada. He started the movement there, and he was getting some appreciation from the elders, but he see that the ground isn't really breaking nicely here. He decided to go to America, actually. And there in US, he started the International Society of Krishna Consciousness. So when it comes to some learning from us in this verse is that when it comes to preaching Krishna consciousness or practicing Krishna consciousness, one should stay in the family life. But when it is becoming very difficult, then, Prabhupada, for example, he told his wife, you got to choose between the tea or me. And the wife said tea, and he said, okay, great, bye-bye then. Prabhupada left the house, actually. And Prabhupada could do it because he was a pure devotee. But the point is, one should try to tolerate as much as possible when it comes to Krishna consciousness because the devotees are humble. I'm not trying to say that we should all leave home and go to the forest. First of all, it's difficult to find forest. And secondly, the point is we have to try and stay where we are, sthane sthita, and practice Krishna consciousness. And somehow or other, Krishna makes the environment favorable. The devotees come and things gets arranged and things happen. But for the sake of preaching, one should kind of carry on as much as possible and do whatever the best is in the situation. There are a couple of lines I want to read in the purport and we'll conclude there. Here in the purport, Prabhupada mentions that thus the house of the Pandavas was as good as Vrindavan, and Vidura should not have given up that place of transcendental bliss. Therefore, the reason for his quitting the house was not exactly family misunderstanding. Rather, Vidura took the opportunity to meet Rishi Maitreya and discuss transcendental knowledge. For a saintly person like Vidura, any disturbance due to the worldly affairs is insignificant. Such disturbances, however, are sometimes favorable for higher realization, and therefore Vidura took advantage of a family misunderstanding in order to meet Maitreya Rishi. So, you see, it was very much justified what Vidura did here. And you could see when he went to the house of the Pandavas, he felt at home. Like sometimes when we are a child, we go to our parents' house or grandparents' house. You feel, okay, my grandfather used to sit in this place, he used to do this. So similarly, Krishna was in the house of the Pandavas and the Pandavas were able to relate. Krishna was lying down here, Krishna was doing these activities, and Krishna was doing this. And the same thing happens when, senior devotees, sannyasis, brahmacharis, other senior devotees, when they come to the house, you think, oh, that Prabhu sat here, let me sit. Like, for example, Keshav Maharaj sits there right in the corner, chants his japa. And as he got up, Ravi Prabhu grabbed the space, he put his head and the hand to the head and he started chanting there. That's how everything becomes sacred when the devotees are sitting in that place. Similarly, Vrindavan is very, very sacred for us. Another example comes in this context about staying in the place. When Prabhupada was gifted the land at Raman Reti by a wonderful Brahmana in Vrindavan, he had a lot of land and he gave it to Prabhupada. And later on, he went into the panchayat and he met other people and he said, what have you done? Why did you do that? You don't know Prabhupada is preaching in the West. They have so much of money. You should ask for the land back and they'll give you a lot of money. And then he wrote to Prabhupada. He said, Srila Prabhupada, I'm having second thoughts about the place I gave you. And then Prabhupada wrote back to him saying, a Brahmana's promise is a promise. What's been given is given. It cannot be taken away. So, and then we saw what struggle we went through, or the devotees, to bring Krishna Balaram temple together actually. And now that is a shelter to the whole of International Society of Krishna Consciousness when you go to Vrindavan. It's jam-packed, so many devotees. I heard so much wonderful experiences. Antaranga Prabhu spent months there actually. Mangalvar Aarti was crazy, but yet devotees squeeze in, yet there is a space, yet you take a darshan, even if it is a glimpse of Radha Shyam Sundar, and you're able to, do that. So, in concluding note, I wanted to read this beautiful verse from Vrindavan, Mahima Amrita, just reminding us how beautiful Sri Vrindavan Dham is. I'll read the translation. Are you ready? Okay. So only 3 people, others maybe not so much. Okay. If one lives in the earthly land of Vrindavan, touches it, sees it, travels to it, meditates upon it, bows down to offer respects to it, sings or hears about it, its glorious qualities, carries its dust on his head, or has any relationship with it, then this purifying earthly Vrindavan will carry him to the spiritual abode of Vrindavan in the spiritual world. Prabodhananda Saraswati Thakur ki jai, Sri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Om Tat Sat. Thank you so much, dear devotees. If anybody has any comments, reflections, or any questions, feel free to ask. Yes, Prabhu, do we have a second mic we can pass? I think Prabhuji at the back and then Antaranga Prabhu, sorry.
Thank you for your class, Divya Naam, Prabhu. You're a quick speaker, and I'd like to ask you to read the verse that you read again at the end because I missed it.
The Vrindavan one?
Yes. It went quickly.
Okay, I'll read it slowly, Prabhu. Thank you for the feedback. Feedback is very important. My Guru Maharaj has a slogan which is said, I live to be corrected. So I hope I can also live to be corrected in his footsteps. So the verse is as follows. here. If one lives in the earthly land of Vrindavan, touches it, sees it, travels to it, meditates upon it, bows down to offer respects to it, sings or hears about its glorious qualities, carries its dust on his head, or has any relationship with it, then this purifying earthly Vrindavan will carry him to the supreme abode of Vrindavan in the spiritual world. Vrindavan Mahima Amrita. Thank you, Prabhu. Antaranga Prabhu, and then we'll go to Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, thank you for sharing the glories of Vrindavan. I have a question. Yesterday, I shared with you this point, and maybe if there's a point we can churn it. So I mentioned to you that when I was in Vrindavan, then you start meditating actually at service. You start meditating on Liverpool, Manchester, Luton, Watford, St. Albans, Southampton, and so on. And I felt that it's nice that we are in Vrindavan. It's very purifying to be in Vrindavan. But at the same time, service is our saving grace. And many times service is in West. Because I've seen many devotees which stay in Vrindavan, they start becoming like, yeah, this is just a Vrindavan. And they never actually tasted the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in a form of outreach, like Western outreach, the difficulties of preaching, traveling, sharing, distributing books, doing harinams, the ungratefulness of the souls in the Kali Yuga cities. So, would you like to share something about like what's the difference between staying in Vrindavan, doing bhajan in Vrindavan, and the importance of preaching outside of Vrindavan, and for instance, bringing people to Vrindavan?
Sure. So, one time in Los Angeles, Srila Prabhupada disciples were together, and there were some tension between the devotees, because one of the Prabhupada disciples was saying that this service of book distribution or Sankirtan or taking the holy name to others is non-different to the Sakhis, the service of the Sakhis or the Manjaris who are doing in Vrindavan. And the devotees were really retaliating. He's saying, oh, you're speaking too high of a topic. How is that relevant? So Rameshwar Prabhu wrote a letter to Srila Prabhupada trying to get his understanding on this matter. And Srila Prabhupada said, this is an absolutely correct understanding. Because what you're trying to do is bring others to the lotus feet of Radha and Krishna. And that's exactly what the gopis in Vrindavan is trying to do. So the service of thinking and meditating to try and bring others to Krishna consciousness, and also meditating on Vrindavan in one sense is non-different actually. And the other aspect is every devotee, like I remember Keshav Maharaj speaking this and saying that every year there should be a time for each of us that we are able to go deeper in our meditation and our bhajan and go to that sacred place where we can cultivate our own Krishna consciousness. And for that reason, it's very important to go to the dhams and spend some time here from the Vaishnavas there and do some service, as Antaranga Prabhu is saying, and also the service. So to answer your question, they are both important and they are non-different, Prabhu, in my limited understanding. Second point I want to share is His Holiness Indradyumna Maharaj. He was flying in, second time Prabhupada was coming into London, and they were flying in from India. And Indradyumna Maharaj had heard, not second time, few times Prabhupada had been, he had heard about the glorious reception the devotees gave Prabhupada when he lands, any airport, but particularly in London. So the whole flight, Indradyumna Maharaj was meditating that when am I going to land and when am I going to see that amazing reception of Srila Prabhupada being received. They landed, they were waiting for the luggage, they waited, and Prabhupada bags didn't come. And then Shyam Sundar Prabhu, who was here receiving Prabhupada, he came in and he met Prabhupada midway between kind of coming out. And he said, Prabhupada, Indradyumna will bring the luggage. Let's go. And Prabhupada said, okay, that's a good idea. So he left Indradyumna Maharaj, and Indradyumna Maharaj was going, all my life I was waiting to see this reception, and now I'm waiting for the luggage here. So then they took, and finally after an hour the luggage came, and Maharaj took the luggage back to Bari place. And there was and then as he arrived, and he was extremely hungry, and he said, I was upset because didn't get to eat and missed the reception. So he asked the devotee, is there any prasadam? And the devotee said, oh man, you just missed it. We just finished everything. And he said, then Maharaj said, is there anything I can get, something? He said, no, it's all finished actually. And Maharaj was devastated. So he carried, and the trunk was very heavy. It had Prabhupada books in it. So somehow he carried all the way. Long story short, he gave it to, he went in, opened the door. Prabhupada plate was there, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. He went in, kept the bag. And then as he got up, Prabhupada was right at the back. And Prabhupada's hand went like this at Indradyumna Maharaj's back, like here. And as he was leaving, Prabhupada said, I'll give you two instructions. He said, first one, preach boldly and have faith in the holy name. And just in that moment, Indradyumna Maharaj said he had the whole clarity that the service to the spiritual master is the highest thing you can ever get. It's okay if I didn't get to see the reception. And then Prabhupada opened the trunk, reached out, took out his dhoti and gave it to Indradyumna Maharaj. And he was Grahastha at that time. And then he would wear this dhoti everywhere he would go. And he was in New Mayapur. And then the other leaders would come and say, you can't wear this, it's saffron, you're a Grahastha. And Maharaj said, Prabhupada gave me. And then everybody was like, so, in essence, what I'm trying to say is, to answer your question, Antaranga Prabhu, the service to the spiritual master and service of preaching and meditating on Luton, Leicester, Manchester, and all these places is as good as meditating in Vrindavan if I understand Prabhupada's and the mood of our acharyas. I'll say it on that. Thank you, Prabhu. I think Prabhu had a question, and we'll just take these two. Sorry, I'm conscious of the time because it's only these two questions and the breakfast in between of all of us.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Just regarding Vidura, he left. You mentioned that he left as he can't do his bhajan or his preaching. Can you just elaborate what the bhajan part was?
Sure, Prabhu. So because the environment was not very conducive, everyone there wasn't looking at Krishna with a love or devotion in that palace because of the Kauravas. They have created some kind of a toxic environment in that place because they were always meditating on how is it that they can harass the Pandavas, how is it that they can harm the Pandavas. So in that environment, you cannot do your practice where you're trying to read in Bhagavad Gita, Sarva Dharmam Parityaja Mamekam Sharanam Raja, and on the other hand, you're trying to give harm to the devotees which are as close, as dear to Krishna as his own life actually. So in that environment, Vidura was just not able to do your practice. And you see, Prabhu, intrinsically, our line is so beautiful that the bhajan and the preaching, they goes together. If you're not able to do one or the other, after a while you'll start to feel suffocated. Because bhajan is like a dal and the preaching is like a rice. And when you put the rice and dal together, they become a khichdi and it has more nutrients than you would have it individually actually. So from that perspective, it just made perfect sense for Vidura to take off from there. I hope that answers your question. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you so much for your class. I did want to ask something similar as well, but the other question that I had is for some of us who have not gotten the opportunity to visit Vrindavan yet, maybe if you could share with us from your experience, what meditation we should have so we can be able to get the most from it when the opportunity arises and how we can prepare ourselves for that.
Sure. So Prabhu, what you just said is actually the very mood which is already making you to be in Vrindavan, because Prabhupada has remarked on this on many occasions. Like I remember recently I've been hearing Prabhupada memories by his disciple, and Jamuna Mataji was expressing that how much she wanted to go to Vrindavan one time, and she went to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said, I'll take you to Vrindavan, but not now. And they did get to go later. But what Prabhupada was trying to say is that it's quite amazing. I think just by dedicating our life to Srila Prabhupada, we are actually living in Vrindavan, because Prabhupada carried Vrindavan wherever he went, in all the places, in whether it is America and wherever he went, he was actually in the Jaladuta diaries. He remarked he's very much missing Vrindavan, and sometimes he was spoken bad of about some of his god brothers about saying that when he could not stop at the samadhi or the place of his spiritual master, and he remarked that do they think that actually my spiritual master and me are separated? Not even for a moment. So similarly, Prabhupada and Vrindavan were always linked. Prabhupada carried Vrindavan where he gave. And the best part is we are coming in the line of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who actually is giving the Braj Prem even in this place. as you are so enthusiastically dancing in the Kirtan, in the Rath Yatra, we may externally see, okay, this is happening in London, but these are the Sankirtan pastimes which Chaitanya Mahaprabhu predicted are actually happening. Narottam Das Thakur clearly sings in his bhajan that those who dive in the pastimes of Mahaprabhu, they come onto the other shore of Radha and Krishna pastimes, Prabhu. So what you're doing here and what we are trying to do here and it's great to have that longing, because when you go to Vrindavan with this kind of awe and reverence and meditation, that's how you really see Vrindavan. Not somebody like myself who lands up in Vrindavan every now and then for twice a year because my parents live there and I have a great fortune that I get to go them. But you're right, familiarity can breed contempt, So from that perspective, just keep harboring the mood, when will I go, when will I go? Like Prabhupada, how will I preach, how will I preach? That was his mood. How am I going to make my spiritual master's word come true? So similarly, carrying on with this mode and doing your best in your practice and sharing Krishna consciousness with others will get us into Vrindavan. If not, you're already living in Vrindavan, Prabhu. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. And my apologies for anything which I may have said may not be pleasing to the Vaishnavas. Thank you, everybody. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Vancha kalpatarubhasya kripa sindhu vacha patita nam pavnebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.